Hey ladies, welcome back to my podcast. Today is a listener requested topic. I have been asked this so many times recently, and so I thought even though we're not actually making progress on this yet, this would be a really fun topic today. So I'm going to be talking about our future homesteading goals and our future dreams. I've got a lot to say about this, so I'm going to try to keep it short. But this is something I have been asked a lot, and I have talked about this a lot in the past, but I haven't really talked about it much in the last probably year or two. But it is something that's always kind of sizzling in the back burner for Jason and I. And we have taken kind of a roundabout way of getting to our homesteading goals. And a big part of that is because we have relocated from California. Jason and I both grew up our entire lives in California and have been figuring out the last 4 years where we wanted to move to. And so we did travel full time around the United States for 2 years. A big part of that was looking for where we wanted to relocate to. And a big part of it is we just wanted to see the country. We were not in a super big hurry to get completely settled yet. Then we lived in a rental house in Oklahoma for 2 years, which was originally going to be a year, ended up being 2 years. It was actually amazing. And so obviously we were not making huge goals. If you want to think of homesteading as like acreage and cows, we weren't making progress in that necessarily. However, we did hone and work on a lot of homesteading goals while we lived in the suburbs in our rental house. Let me tell you what, if you have dreams and goals of homesteading, I mean, whatever that kind of looks like for you, I just look at homesteading as like, even just learning how to can is a homesteading skill. But a hobby farm, or just even having chickens, or just becoming a little bit more self-sufficient, whatever you want to call it, because sometimes people think homesteading means you 100% live off the land and the farm is your full-time income. That's not actually what our goals are. And so with that, we are now kind of in our third step, which is we are back in an RV. Yay, we actually really love it. And we are going to be on the hunt for property. We are not settling right away. We actually have some traveling goals that we're going to be doing. We have some people and places we want to visit. We're going to have a newborn. The interest rates are still psychotic. And so we're in a season again of being absolutely okay with this going slow. And so there's a lot behind the scenes. I'm not going to share everything and all the details, but our Lord willing, our next step will be property. We will be hopefully building or doing like an extreme fixer-upper to where we will be living in the RV on our property while we build or renovate. And that's what we're really hoping. So I kind of want to break down today, like what are our dreams? What's our goal with wanting to homestead? And I don't think every person out there is supposed to homestead, but I do think that starting to learn how to be a little bit more self-sufficient, not relying on the government for everything, not relying on grocery stores and food chains, recognizing that those are all very fragile systems. And we don't do this out of fear, but taking a little bit more responsibility in our food systems and where our food is coming from. And I say that now as someone who's in an RV who can only have a week's worth of groceries at once. So again, it's not out of fear, but I think everybody could use, doing a little bit here or there. So for us, we have a lot of dreams. We have a lot of dreams and we have a lot of goals. Jason and I are very much dream people. We like to dream big, but we really don't know how it's all going to shape out or how God's going to lead. And that so proves true over the last 4 years. And so we have a lot of things, even within our business. We want to open some physical stores. We have got like brick and mortar. We have got a lot of things that we feel like God could be leading us towards. And so God's going to lead in those. God's going to lead in our final everything, our final plans. So what we can do is we can make the plans, we can follow God's leading, but we know that he can throw a curveball at a left field and everything changes. So we're just trusting that. We have plans that we're following down this track, and we'll see in the next 2 to 3 years what our updates are going to be here for you. But our really, really big goal, like let's talk about why homesteading. Why do we want to do this? Why do we want acreage? So, and really our dream is like, if we could, our dream is to get like minimum like 40 acres is what we'd really, really like. Really not sure if that's going to be affordable right now. There's also dreams and plans of we buy 5 or 10 acres and we eventually buy more. Like there's, we'll see how God leads, right? If money was no obstacle, we would buy 150 acres. Like, that's what we would love to do. So, but you have to balance it, because we don't want to live an hour and a half from church. We want to be within our church community. There's a lot of things that are also important too. And so it's all about balance and figuring out where God leads, and he will lead us to the right thing. But a big part of this, a big part of our dream, is to be able to help launch our kids off into this world in a better way, so that our grandkids and our great grandkids can have a better future. This is something that has really changed for Jason and I a lot in the last few years, is thinking a lot more legacy minded, and thinking of our kids and our grandkids. How can we help them in a world that is becoming more hostile to Christianity? How can we help them in an area where, by the time our kids are grown, by the time they're in their 30s, you might not be able to buy 10 acres like at all, anywhere, ever, even though we feel now, oh, it's so expensive. And so that's what we're really looking for, is long term. And so if I don't ever end up in my dream home, if I never have a large home, but we have some acreage, I'm going to be really, really happy with that. And so that's what we're really looking forward, is like, we can't do everything right now. We can't set up our kids. We don't have the financial means to be able to just buy each of our kids 10 acres and a house. Like, no, we are not there. And so what are some things, though, that we can do to just help our kids to be able to launch off maybe in a little bit of a better way into adulthood, to be able to get married young if they want to be able to start a family and be able to have their wives stay home. Like, these are all things that are very, very real considerations in this ridiculous economy that we're in. And so we're looking for ways that we can set up our kids in a good way, that they will then be in a better position to hopefully set up their kids and their, it really is this legacy mindset. We can do some things now that are going to have an immense impact on our grandkids and our great grandkids, which a lot of that, Jason and I won't even be around to see, but that is something that we are very, very passionate about. And so, we're looking far beyond the immediate next 10 years of raising our kids. We're looking for that too, but we also want to look for what's coming down the line. And what do we want to be as grandparents? And so that is something, that's a huge motivator in what we're doing. So we really want acreage now, because that's awesome. But also so that maybe our kids could build on when they first get married, or they could move a small house onto. We want to have it so that they can help develop the land and have access to real food, even maybe when they're adults. We have one kid, and we'll see. Obviously God leads and changes, but we have one kid that, as he's getting older, as he's heading into teenagehood, he wants to be a farmer. And every skill that he has, every passion, every interest absolutely points that way. I would not be surprised at all if he becomes a farmer or ends up working in something like that with his hands. He's definitely going to end up working something with his hands. This kid is an entrepreneur. Like, I can see him establishing a farm and like completely running with it. It's everything he wants to do and talk about right now. Now, will that end up being the case when he's 20? Maybe not. Maybe he'll change. But however, I think in a passion like this, it absolutely could be. And so being able to have acreage now that he is starting to, he's all these plans for when we get cows, he's going to sell the milk, and he's got all these things that he wants to do. And if we can help him launch into a business when he's 16, 17, 18 years old, there's so much about that we want to be able to provide for our kids. Even, not having huge financial, like, we don't have deep pockets that we can, just give them, here's 50 grand, go start a business. That would be wonderful. We don't have that. And so what can we do to help launch them off? And so, having acreage really does just play into that for us. There's things that our kids may end up wanting to do that they talk about now, that if we have kind of it available for them, there are things that they could do that we don't have the time or money to be able to do now. And yet, if they can start younger, if they're able to, be able to start off in that way, then we want to invest in this for our future generations. And that is something that we're very passionate about, that the kids are very passionate about. And so it's a lot of what drives us. And so we really think through a lot, like, what inheritance are we leaving our family? I don't think we're going to leave our children with millions and millions of dollars as an inheritance. But there are things that we can do that can help them, and they in turn can then help their kids better. And it's a lot of what goes into our dream and what we want to do. Okay, so with that said, I do want to talk about what are some of our specific goals. I know that's more what people are asking, is like, what do you want to do with homesteading? Now, some of this stuff we've done enough of that we know is totally up our family's alley, that we're going to love. And some of this stuff is going to be new for us. And so with all things homesteading, you really have to take it all with a grain of salt, because we've not had a dairy cow. Now, we think we're going to really like it. We've done enough research. We've been around cows enough. We know the ins and outs that I think it's going to go really well. But we also could have a cow for a year or two, and then the kids get older, they get busier, they start getting jobs, the cow is no longer a big priority. We end up selling the cow. But we had it for a year or two as a great experience. So some of this doesn't have to necessarily also be like, we get a cow and it is our entire personality forever. A lot of this can be for a season. God has given you certain things. For a season, God has, given you a cow for the discipline of the kids rotate getting up at 5 a.m. and milking the cow. I actually think that's fantastic. There's a lot of farm chores that are very, very good for children. There was a study with pregnancy brain. I'm not going to remember any of the details, but there was a study done, I want to say it was like Harvard or something, where like all the major like big businesses had said like their favorite type of person ever to hire were like farmers, or kids who grew up on farms, because they were the hardest workers. They knew discipline. They knew how to stick to schedules. Like, they were amazing. There's so much discipline and good things that can happen on a farm, and also so much fun. And like, our kids just think it's the coolest thing ever to get a cow. Now, of course, the reality of getting up every day and milk it becomes a chore. Not everybody's going to want to do it. But I tell you what, that one kid I was talking about, he will be out there every morning. It'll be his favorite thing. And so some of this stuff is stuff that we'll see as we get into it. And it'll be experiments, and it'll be figuring out what does excite our family and what we really do enjoy. Now, I have promised the kids we get a cow, and they will be the ones milking it. They know that. We get a cow, everybody's on board, and we will make ice cream whenever you want. So the kids are all like, and they want to make cheese, and they want to make yogurt, and they already love our homemade yogurt. So again, a lot of this is stuff that we have already done. We get raw milk from a farm. We try to use that milk to make as much butter as we can, which we can't make very much. We make homemade yogurt every single week. We love making homemade ice cream. And the kids have bought into this vision as well, because they love that every week. They're like, Mom, can we make more? I'm like, sorry, honey, we're out of milk. Or we don't have enough cream to do butter. And so a huge motivation for them is they want all these things. Like, they want the byproducts of it. And so in teaching homesteading, if we decide a cow is too big of a commitment and it's not something that really is in the season we're in, maybe it's too busy, that's okay. That's totally fine. However, it is something that, like, as of right now, everybody is like, yes, when can we get a cow? We really want to do this. And so kind of having that buy-in, not that I'm sure one or two of my kids will not be as excited. It's not that everybody has to have the same vision. But it has become a lot of what our family really loves to do, kind of revolves around those sorts of things. So again, we'll see how this stuff shapes up as we actually get into it. So our actual goals is enough acreage with room to grow in the future. So like I said, kind of bare minimum, we'd really like 10 acres at the minimum, which is 10 acres is not much. And then, we have looked though at some parcels that would be within distance of driving to church, with being totally involved, that are more like 30, 40 acres. We've seen some that are like 100 acres, but again, it's just, how much are we actually going to be able to afford? How long do we want to wait before we actually have a house? There's just a lot of consideration to go into it. And we're talking like completely raw land, like nothing on it. You have to develop everything. And so that's what we're looking at, is we want enough acreage with room to grow in the future. And there could be different steps. We get 5 acres, and then in a few years try to get 10 acres, and we'll see. Again, this is all about where God leads. He could drop 100 acres in our lap that we never could have dreamed of, and he could ask us to move to 2.5 acres and be super happy with it. All right, so this is one we definitely will be doing, is giant garden space where we can preserve a vast majority of our produce. You guys probably know that in the last couple of years, my eventual goal is to be able to grow like almost 100% of our produce that we eat and use. We won't be able to do totally 100%, but we'd like to do the vast majority of the produce we eat. And so that's a huge, giant goal, especially a few years ago, being someone who didn't know how to garden at all, who thought that would be really cool. And I absolutely love gardening. I love it. I love canning. I love all the products of it. It is a lot of work, but it is something that is very, very valuable to our family. And so this is one that even before, when we buy raw land, one of the things we're kind of excited about is when you buy raw land, you move the RV on. We don't have a house yet, but the first summer we're there, we can do the most massive garden you've ever seen. We could get cows. Like there's things that we can start developing as we're building or as we're renovating and as we have the money to be able to do those things as well. So that's definitely something that, like big, huge, giant garden, being able to, and then coming out of that, dehydrating, canning, preserving our food, that is something that we already do. We already know how to do. And that will just be fun to see it expand. And that's something that in our suburban house, our little house in the suburbs, we're not Little House on the Prairie. We're Little House in the Suburbs. We did a ton of gardening and a ton of food preservation the last 2 years, because even in pots, we had a couple little, raised beds in the backyard, we were able to do a lot. And there's so much more that you can do. Even if you live in an apartment, you can get some containers. There's so much more you can do. And a lot of times people think, well, I mean, I can't homestead until I have 40 acres or until we live in the country. And yet if you move all of a sudden onto this homestead, but you don't have any of the skills, it's going to be a lot harder. So if you have goals around this, start learning how to garden. Do a little pot. Do a little one tomato bush. Like you will learn. Or we don't grow peaches here. And so 2 years ago, we bought like 100 pounds of peaches from a peach truck that comes from Georgia. Really great peaches. Bought 100 pounds of peaches and we canned them all. And I hadn't done peaches like that before. I hadn't done 100 pounds of them. It was a great learning experience. We had peaches. The kids loved them. When we opened the last thing of peach, they were like, no, can we do more peaches? And so there's so much that you can do, whether or not you can garden at all. Even if you live in a small space, there are absolutely things that you can do to start learning these skills. Start learning how to make butter. Start learning how to make yogurt. Like anybody can do this in any living situation. We make kombucha and we make yogurt here in our little tiny RV. If we can do it, you can do it. So that's what I really want to encourage is if you're not in your ideal living situation yet, start learning these skills. All right. Next one we talked about is the dairy cows. It depends on the kids' interest. We're actually probably going to start with goats when we first move to really, we don't like goat's milk. Some people do. We do not. But we probably will start with a couple of goats and really kind of get that experience of getting up early, because a cow is a big investment and you really need to care for the cow well. And so we'll start with goats, see how it goes. We've already told the kids that will be our testing ground, depending on how well we do it. A couple of my kids, though, are already planning on 2 dairy cows. They've already got the rotation figured out. And so that's, depending on if that holds, I want a dairy cow, but I will not be out there at 5 a.m. every single morning milking it. And so it does depend on the kids' interest, our family's interest. If we find it worth it, I think a dairy cow is 100% worth it. But we'll just see. We definitely want to do pigs. Pigs are super easy. We want to do pigs for meat. Pigs for sure. That'll probably actually be one of our first livestock that we do, are pigs. And then eventually we've talked about doing larger livestock. Again, this really depends on our acreage, how we're set up, and our time commitment as well. We've talked about doing beef cattle. We've talked about doing sheep. There's a lot of different things that we could venture into. And a lot of that just depends on kind of how it all rolls out. So we'll see. Oh, and then the next one that we'll definitely get right away are chickens and ducks. There's a lot that goes into it, but we would like both. We would like 50% chickens, 50% ducks. And we really, really, really like ducks. There's a lot of things about ducks for their eggs that are amazing. And so we'd like to kind of have a split of chickens and ducks and really test them out side by side and see which we prefer, how we like it. Like that is one that we will be doing. Pretty much when we move on a property, we'll probably be large garden and chicken and ducks. That'll be our first thing. And then maybe the pigs and some goats. And we're just really we'll test it as we go. We want to add in, we don't want to jump in our first year and add 50 million things. We are a very busy family. And so we want to add things in very slowly, get used to taking care of the chickens and the ducks, figure out what they need. And, from there kind of figure out what is our capacity, what can we do, who has an actual interest. At this point, each of the kids have all decided that they have a different area that they're going to be in charge of. So like Malachi is going to be in charge of the cows. And I fully believe that. And then like Magnolia really wants to be in charge of the pigs. And then somebody else is in charge of the chickens. Like everybody has a different thing, and they've already been they'll get books from the library. They've been researching these different areas. So it's definitely been an area that the whole family has been very excited for. So this again will just be like, how does God lead? How do interests change and grow? You can be obsessed with something when you're 8. It doesn't mean that you're actually going to be really interested in it when the time comes. But there is a lot that our family has been very excited about this. We've been talking about this now for 5 years. And so we'll see again, we'll see where the Lord leads. But we would really like to have a lot of elements like that. I'm excited to have more room for gardening, to be able to grow a tea garden. I want to do tea leaves. There's a lot of extra things to add on. And then a lot of it then comes and centers around my kitchen. So what are we growing? What meat are we producing? What are we doing with that produce and that meat? How are we preserving it? Where is it going? And then what makes the most sense for our time? We'd love to plant an orchard. That's something, they say, plant your orchard the day you buy your property. The best time to plant your orchard is 5 years ago. So again, will we have money as we're closing on property to build an entire orchard? I would love that, but who knows? But we would love to do a whole orchard. We want apple trees. We want, there's so many things that we would like to eventually do and cultivate. And again, looking forward to that future so that our grandkids can grow up saying, yeah, at Grandma and Grandpa's property, we go get all of our apples that we need, for the whole year. And every family is able to come and has enough apples to be able to can and make applesauce and apple pie and do all the things. And in a big regard, it's bringing back a lot of these lost skills. This is something like my dad grew up on a farm. And they eventually sold it. They lived in Sacramento, California. So if you have ever been to Sacramento, and it's just jungle city for as far as you can see, well, they owned a very large farm right there in the city. And eventually, as kids got older, left the house, they got really good offer from the developers because they were developing everything. I mean, there's tons of farms there. Now it's all city. And so they eventually sold it. And I think, what if that farm was in our family still? Would be absolutely amazing. But we kind of moved on from that generation and the generation before being very much knowing these skills, knowing how to can, living up in that way. My grandma would take everything from their homestead and turn it into things they needed. And then slowly we just lost those skills. We lost the benefit of those. We lost how to do that. And I don't think that these are old-fashioned skills. I think these are skills that we need to bring back and to teach the next generations, and that they are 1,000% worth it. Not that we all have to do all the things and make all the things and do all the things, but that starting to learn how to do some of these skills really is vital in today's economy, in today's world, and as we move into the future. And so that is, long story short, of what we want to work on and what we want to do. So again, we'll see how the Lord leads. But as of now, that's what we're doing. And as of now, without property, without dairy cows, we're working on those skills. We're working on learning how to make all those things, how to take 100 pounds of peaches and can them and make really good pie fillings and all of those things. We're starting to learn those skills so that once we're on our property, those skills are ready, and we're learning the outside skills. We're learning the chicken coop and mucking it out and all of that stuff. So hopefully this was interesting. If you guys have homesteading goals, if you're working on things, I would love to hear what you're working on. Come find me on Instagram. I'd love to hear, or in our private community, findingjoycommunity.com. I would love to hear if you have similar goals, if there's things that you're working on, if there's things, maybe you feel stuck in a season where you can't live on acreage yet, if you're not there financially, or you live in the city, or, what have you. What is it that you're doing right now to work on just being a little bit more self-sufficient? Because no matter where you live, there are definitely things that you can work on. Well, come find me, share your thoughts, and we'll see you guys back here next week for the next episode.